Hello, everybody. It's quite early morning. It is Dolphin Song, Lawrence and John, and it is really exciting. And we are on chapter 20. The revival of Claudius changed everything. There was no longer any separation between the seven of them, and nobody suggested that there should be. It was agreed that they would all sleep on the beach until Claudius was well enough to climb the steep dunes, and then they would all stay together in the lighthouse. Martine had spent a good proportion of her school days in solitude and had never been involved in any team sports. Vacancies on netball and hockey teams at school had an uncanny way of being conveniently full when she applied to join them. So it was a novel experience for her to be part of a group, especially since she was a very appreciated part because of what she'd done for Claudius. "It's not me you have to thank, it's Grace," Martine kept saying to everyone. "She gave me the plant." "Yes," said Sherilyn, "but you guessed what the leaves were for. You kept them alive. I mean, when you put them in that bottle in our cabin, I thought you were a fruitcake." One of the first things Martine discovered about being in a group was that while at school you could fool yourself into thinking you knew people really well. You could fool yourself into thinking you knew people really well because you saw them every day. You never actually knew them until you had to live with them. Take Sherilyn. Martine had always thought of Sherilyn as being nice but a bit dim, and had taken it for granted that she came from a cereal box perfect family living behind electric gates in a suburb packed with other cereal box perfect families. Yet she couldn't have been more wrong. It turned out that Sherilyn's actress mum had walked out of the house when Sherilyn was 1, and her brother and sister were 2 and 3, and hadn't been seen since. For the past 7 years, Sherilyn had been living with her dad, siblings, and Thai stepmother in one of Storm Crossing's most bohemian multicultural neighborhoods. As a consequence of her stepmom's influence, she had become quite a good cook. Nobody had found that out until now, because Sherilyn had spent a lot of her time on the island, homesick, weeping, and trying to escape from crabs and insects. Also, for the most part, there hadn't been any food for her to cook, or any fire for her to cook with. Now she had both. Claudius's near-death experience had made her pull herself together, and she was determined to contribute. There was limited fare on the island, but Sherilyn worked wonders with what there was. It was she who recognized the grizzled old tubers in a store cupboard in the lighthouse as cassava, a root vegetable. Jake improvised the pot for her using bulb protectors from the lighthouse. She boiled the cassava and mashed it and served it up on banana leaves, accompanied by fish cooked in coconut milk and flavored with wild chilies, herbs, and green lemons. They ate it with their hands, and somehow that made it extra tasty. The fish was provided by Nathan and Ben, their chief fishers. There wasn't too much to discover about Nathan, who was sweet but dull and would probably grow up to be an accountant. But he was very likable and a good person to have around. He was never going to be a nature lover, but he did enjoy fishing. And once, when he and Ben had come across a bee's nest in the hollow of an old tree, he'd unexpectedly revealed that his uncle was a beekeeper. Before anyone could stop him, he was smoking the bees out of their hole. He earned a great dripping wedge of honeycomb and 2 stings for his trouble. Lucy, meanwhile, had recovered her airs and graces, something Martine found weirdly comforting. She spent a lot of time lying in the sun complaining about the stains and rips in her white tracksuit, and being nostalgic about Luke. She was nice, well, nice-ish to Martine, but not exactly industrious. Most of her energy seemed to have been expended on the night Claudius felt ill. "I'm so bored," she told anyone who would listen. "I miss TV, I miss music, I miss my room, I miss Luke and my mum and dad and my bed and soap and toothpaste and shampoo and coffee and chocolate. Boy, do I miss chocolate, but mostly I'm just bored. Bored. Jake had set himself the task of maintaining the giant SOS, large enough to be seen by passing aircraft on Runway Beach. He did everything that was asked of him, effortlessly gathering great piles of wood, but he kept himself to himself. To varying degrees, they all went through parts of every day where they hated their island prison, lovely as it was. But Jake agonized most over the rugby training he was missing. He made a crude rugby ball out of coconut husk and bark, and whiled away the hours kicking it over palm trees and doing press-ups so that he'd be match fit when he eventually returned to Storm Crossing. Not surprisingly, Ben was a subject of much interest. Jake had not yet forgiven him for deceiving everyone as he saw it, by making them think he was mute, and Lucy, who had always ridiculed him as a tree-hugging nutcase, now had to live with the remembrance of how she had treated him. But everyone was fascinated to hear his story. Not that he gave them much information. When Sherilyn asked him the questions they all wanted the answer to, namely why he had never spoken at school, Ben replied simply, "I didn't have anything to say." But after years of being an outcast, he, like Martine, couldn't help but enjoy being included or asked for his opinion or help, which he frequently was. Of everyone, Ben had adapted best to island life. It was as if he was born to it. It made Martine proud to see the envious faces of kids who had always bullied or belittled him when they saw him swim, fish, or build beds or shelters. "Where did you learn all that?" Sherilyn wanted to know. "Or what?" Ben said, and then pretended he had an urgent appointment with Nathan on the other side of the island. Over the next 3 evenings, the 7 of them came together around a fire on the seashore, and everyone, except Claudius, talked about the things they had in common, the dolphins, or their feelings on the nights of the storm, or how desperately they missed their families, or how terrified they were of never being found, or whether or not they would do things differently when they left the island. Topics like pop music and the bizarre behavior of celebrities, favorites at school, seemed trivial after what they'd been through. Claudius was still too weak and listless to participate. If someone addressed him, he would nod or shake his head or give a one-sentence answer. But most of the time, he just stared into the flames. "I never thought I'd say this," Ben commented privately to Martine, "but I miss the old Claudius. The spirit of him, anyway." Only Martine knew the root cause of Claudius's blues. When they were alone together on the second day of his recovery, he'd mumbled something about hating himself for letting everyone down. "I told everybody that my father would have us out of here in 48 hours, he confided. "I told them it was hard to get lost these days. I got my friend's hope up. Now we could be stranded here for months." "Nobody blames you for that," she assured him. "Tendai always says it's important to be positive in a survival situation. Anyway, it was just you getting sick that brought us all together. Don't worry, we'll be rescued soon." Inside, she didn't feel nearly as confident as she sounded. She couldn't stop thinking about something Ben had said earlier. "Martine, I have a really bad feeling about this island. I don't think it's a coincidence that the only boat we've seen in nearly a week is one that came to investigate an explosion. There's a reason people are staying away. There's something wrong with this place." It was Jake who came to tell them that the dolphins were behaving strangely. "I was practicing sprints at Dolphin Bay and they came right up to the shore. I thought it was cool that they were watching me, but then they started milling around and acting all confused. You'd better come see what's going on." It was late afternoon. Everyone but Claudius, who was still too weak to leave his bamboo cot for more than a few hours at a time, ran the length of Runway Beach. They rounded the peninsula and were confronted by the most heartbreaking sight. 21 dolphins were splayed across the white sand in golden sunlight. Something had driven them to flee the sea. The tide was going out and they were stranded, waiting to die. Martine couldn't believe what she was seeing. It was the image in the cave painting, right down to the number of dolphins. The second prophecy had just come true. But it was worse. These were the dolphins who had saved them from the ocean's wrath. They had become friends. They had names. Sundancer, Rain Queen, Patch, Honey, Thunder, Ash, Steel, and Minnie, and most distressingly, Little Storm. They were all there. Everyone turned to Martine for answers. "What do we do? How do we save them?" they clamoured. Martine didn't know how to respond. Even supposing they were able to keep 21 dolphins from dying of shock and overheating, which she doubted, there was no earthly way that they were strong enough to carry any dolphin apart, perhaps from Little Storm to the water's edge, not with the tide going out. The sea was retreating so quickly that it was already more than 20 feet from the nearest dolphin. Soon it would be a quarter of a mile away. She wanted to shout back, "Why are you asking me? I'm not a doctor or a vet. I'm an 11-year-old kid. Yes, I have a gift, but I don't know what it does, or what it's for, or how to use it properly." But that wouldn't help the dolphins. Plus, she was not about to admit to having a gift, so she just said, "There's only one thing we can do, and that's try to keep them wet and cool until the tide returns and we can push them back out to sea." "How long will that take?" Lucy asked. "I mean, are we talking 1 hour, 2 hours?" 12 hours, Ben told her. Sherilyn gulped. 12 hours? We're meant to keep them wet and cool for 12 hours? "Well, we just can't," Lucy declared flatly. "Simple as that, we'll be dead as well." "We can try," Nathan said, but without much conviction. Martine glanced at Ben. Precious minutes were being wasted while they argued. "These dolphins saved our lives," Ben reminded them. "Yeah," agreed Jake. "And if it was a matter of keeping them wet for an hour or two, I'd be the first to do it. But get real, guys. You're asking us to keep 21 dolphins wet for a whole day." "Exactly." They all jumped, unnoticed. Claudius had come up behind them. He was swaying slightly, and his skin was still more yellow than gold, but there was something of his old charisma in the set of his shoulders. "That's what you do when someone or something saves your life," he told Jake. "You save theirs right back. Come on, everyone. You heard Martine. We need to keep the dolphins wet." Right. Claudius, one word, redemption. Let's see what happens. Can they keep the dolphins alive? What's the next thing that's going to happen?